Some people can walk into a room full of people and still feel completely alone. They can have coworkers, family members, hundreds of followers online, and people they occasionally talk to. And yet, when life becomes difficult, there may be almost no one they genuinely want to call. And then there are people who seem perfectly comfortable with that. They don't constantly search for new friends. They don't feel the need to be invited everywhere. They may spend entire weekends alone and genuinely enjoy it. From the outside, it can look like loneliness, but sometimes it isn't. The interesting question isn't simply why someone has very few friends. It's why they don't seem particularly interested in having more. Because having almost no friends can come from completely different psychological places. Sometimes it reflects confidence, independence, or a preference for deeper relationships. Sometimes it comes from disappointment, avoidance, insecurity, or a learned belief that getting close to people isn't worth the emotional cost. And the difficult part is that these can look almost identical from the outside. Imagine someone named Daniel. Daniel goes to work, comes home, makes dinner, watches something, and spends most evenings alone. He rarely messages people first. He doesn't post much on social media. When coworkers invite him somewhere, he often says no. People might assume he's antisocial, but nobody knows that Daniel actually wants close friendships. He simply expects people to eventually disappoint him. So instead of risking rejection, he keeps everyone at a comfortable distance. Now imagine someone else who behaves exactly the same way. She enjoys her own company. She has 2 close friends she's known for years. She doesn't care about being socially popular, and she has no desire to maintain dozens of relationships. Same behavior, completely different psychology. That's why the number of friends someone has tells you very little by itself. One of the most important distinctions is the difference between being alone and feeling alone. Solitude is a situation. Loneliness is an emotional experience. A person can have very few friends and feel deeply fulfilled. Another person can have dozens of friends and feel emotionally invisible. For some people, having a small social circle is actually a form of selectivity. They don't dislike people. They simply don't feel connected to everyone. They may prefer conversations that go deeper than small talk. They may find constant social interaction existing. They may be perfectly happy spending time alone because their sense of identity isn't dependent on being socially included. This can sometimes overlap with introversion, but introversion doesn't mean being shy, socially incapable, or afraid of people. An introverted person may enjoy people enormously while still needing more time alone to recharge. The problem begins when solitude stops being a preference and becomes a protection. That's where psychology gets more interesting. Consider someone who repeatedly tells themselves, people are fake. Maybe they have experienced betrayal. Maybe a friendship ended badly. Maybe they were excluded during childhood. Maybe they spent years feeling misunderstood. Eventually, the brain learns from repeated emotional experiences. If closeness has repeatedly been followed by disappointment, distance can start to feel safer. The person may not consciously think, I am afraid of intimacy. Instead, they think, I just don't need people. That distinction matters. Sometimes what looks like independence is actually emotional avoidance wearing the clothes of independence. A person might say, I don't trust anyone. But underneath that statement could be something much more vulnerable. I don't want to become dependent on someone and discover that they can hurt me. So they don't give people enough access to hurt them. They don't share much. They don't ask for help. They don't initiate conversations. They keep relationships shallow. And then they use the resulting lack of closeness as evidence that nobody is trustworthy. This can create a self-reinforcing cycle. You avoid vulnerability because you expect rejection. Because you avoid vulnerability, people never get to know the real you. Because people don't get close, you feel disconnected. And because you feel disconnected, you conclude that people aren't capable of understanding you. The belief creates the behavior, and the behavior appears to prove the belief. Psychologists sometimes describe processes like this through the idea of confirmation bias. The tendency to notice information that supports what we already believe while overlooking information that challenges it. If someone believes, nobody really cares about me, one forgotten message can feel extremely significant. But the friend who checked on them 3 times that week may barely register. The mind isn't necessarily lying, it's selectively paying attention. And this is where people with very few friends can become surprisingly complicated. Some genuinely don't want a large social circle. Others desperately want connection, but have built such strong emotional defenses that they no longer recognize their own avoidance. There is another possibility that is rarely discussed. Sometimes people have fewer friends because their standards for closeness have changed. As people become more self-aware, They may become less willing to tolerate relationships built entirely on convenience. They stop forcing friendships simply because they've known someone for 10 years. They stop pretending to enjoy conversations that leave them emotionally drained. They become more comfortable saying no, and their social circle gets smaller. From the outside, this can look like social failure, but psychologically, it may represent better boundaries. The important question is not how many friends do you have. It's, why do you have the number of friends you have? If someone has 3 close friends and feels loved, understood, and supported, there may be nothing wrong with that. But if someone has no close relationships and secretly feels unwanted, their solitude deserves a different kind of attention. Because humans don't simply need social contact, we need meaningful connection. And meaningful connection requires something that many emotionally guarded people find difficult: vulnerability. Vulnerability means allowing another person to see something that could potentially be rejected: your insecurity, your fear, your mistake, your need for support, your excitement about something you care about, your real opinion. And once someone has been hurt badly enough, vulnerability can feel less like connection and more like handing someone a weapon. So they become extremely self-sufficient. They solve everything themselves. They rarely ask for help. They disappear when they're struggling. They tell everyone they're fine. And eventually, people stop checking in because they've learned that this person doesn't seem to need them. Ironically, the behavior designed to prevent abandonment can sometimes produce the very isolation the person feared. This is one reason attachment patterns can matter in adult friendships. People develop expectations about relationships through experience. If closeness has historically felt safe, a person may find it easier to trust and depend on others. If closeness has repeatedly felt unpredictable, controlling, rejecting, or painful, emotional distance can become an automatic strategy. Not necessarily because the person doesn't care, sometimes because they care too much. And there's another group of people who have almost no friends for a completely different reason. They have become extremely comfortable with themselves. They don't need constant external validation. They don't measure their worth by invitations. They don't panic when someone doesn't text back. They can sit alone without interpreting solitude as evidence that something is wrong with them. That is psychologically very different from isolation driven by fear. The healthiest form of solitude isn't, "I don't need anybody." It's closer to, "I enjoy my own company, but I am still capable of letting people into my life." That's the balance. Because independence and connection aren't opposites. A psychologically healthy person can need nobody to complete their identity while still deeply valuing relationships. So if you have almost no friends, don't immediately label yourself antisocial, broken, boring, or unusual. Instead, ask a more uncomfortable question if the right person came along. Someone trustworthy, emotionally mature, and genuinely interested in knowing you. Would you actually let them get close? If the answer is yes, perhaps you simply prefer a small circle. But if the answer is no, and you keep finding reasons why nobody is worth trusting, nobody understands you, nobody is good enough, or relationships are always a waste of time, there may be something deeper happening. Maybe you're protecting yourself from something you don't want to experience again. And perhaps the biggest clue isn't how many people are around you. It's what happens inside you when someone tries to come closer. Because sometimes having almost no friends means you have learned how to enjoy solitude. And sometimes it means you have become so good at protecting yourself that you no longer notice what the protection is costing you. The difference can be difficult to see, but it may change the way you understand your entire social life. Maybe the goal isn't to have more friends. Maybe the goal is to understand why you keep people at the distance you do, and whether that distance is giving you peace or quietly taking something from you.